It is Friday, April 12th. Let's talk PlayStation. As always, we'll kick it off with our PlayStation Plus games reminder. So for the month of April 2019, it is Conan Exiles and The Surge. You have until May 1st to download these games. Now, our first news story, hallelujah, but we finally have PlayStation Network name changes. The feature should be worldwide for everybody at this point. It was announced earlier in the week, and it's really no different from how Sony was explaining it a little bit earlier, a few months back, when they said that the feature was coming, but more or less, if you go to your account management on PS4, surf through a few menus, it's where you hit profile and you can change your ID. You can change it once for free, so that's good. Everybody gets one shot at changing their ID. Anything after that, $9.99. If you're a PlayStation Plus subscriber, it's going to run you $4.99. I know the big thing, of course, here is game compatibility, because PlayStation Network name changes essentially were such a big issue for Sony for so long, because the way the network was laid out, it's really almost impossible for them to sort of rebuild the network and unlatch that original ID from your name. So game compatibility is a bit of an issue here, but they're saying that basically any game that was published after April 1st, 2018, in theory, the game was made to support this feature. Sony's mandating that on developers. But actually, if you go to Sony's website, there is still a list that they've actually published telling you that there are certain games where there are still issues, and they could be very minor issues. Things like maybe your old ID might still display, but you still retain all your stats and things like that. Minor stuff. There's a list for that, but there's also a very small list, but still a list indeed for critical issues. So these games could have major sort of game-breaking bugs, possibly you losing trophy progress or paid DLC, things like that. You won't necessarily lose trophies, but if you have progress towards trophies, these games might also be a bit of a big issue. PS3 and Vita games completely unsupported. There is no support there whatsoever, so that's really at your discretion if you still go back and play PS3 and Vita games every so often in terms of paid content and things like that. So if you change your ID and you play on those old systems, you might want to reconsider. If you change your ID, you have the option to display your old ID for 30 days. After those 30 days are up, that old ID will disappear. This is just a courtesy really for your friends that might not notice that you've changed your ID, so they'll get a little notification there on your profile that says, hey, this is who this person previously was. You are also allowed to, at any point, for free, mind you, to go back to a previous ID by calling Sony support. And I actually want to focus in on this because on Sony's site it says you can revert back to previous IDs, which almost makes it sound as though you can build this paper trail of IDs if you continuously keep changing your ID. Even if you're paying for it, though, you're continuously claiming more and more IDs, because the thing is, Sony is not removing old or inactive IDs from the network. So more or less, anytime an ID is claimed or is currently in use, I mean, it will never be available again, as it stands right now, because like I just said, Sony just can't unlatch those previous IDs. So in a sense, even though you're changing your online ID today, the basic makeup of your profile still at the very core has that original ID that you built. It just won't be displayed to people on the friends list or games again after April 1st, 2018, in multiplayer lobbies, things like that. So it almost sounds like you can keep changing your name and you just have a laundry list at this point of names that you can, at any point when you want to, go back to. That's the way it's sounding to me, but the other thing about this is that Sony can now do a policy change on inappropriate names. So we've had a few news stories about that before, where if somebody perhaps has an inappropriate PSN ID and they just automatically get banned, and it's very tough to get that account back, and at times when you get the account back, you're basically just getting a new account with no trophies and all your purchases being gone and things like that. So Sony says, oh, we restored your account, but essentially you're getting a new account. Now, because of the name change feature, what they're going to do actually is, if your name is deemed inappropriate and you log into PSN, you'll be given a new name that is something along the lines of temp XY0, whatever, you know what I mean, just a bunch of numbers, and then you are given the option to change your ID, or you can actually open an appeal to possibly get your old name back. But essentially, your purchases and your trophies and things like that are now saved from the fact that we now have the name change feature, which is great. So here we go, we finally got it. Maybe you will expect a video on Tuesday where we test some of the old PS3 and Vita games and just see what happens. I might end up doing that for this Tuesday's video, so stay tuned for that. If not, then we might do something else. But moving on to Guerrilla Games, they have a new job listing that gives us some insight in terms of what they're working on, and to be fair, we've had a general idea of where they are in terms of their development cycle, because they've been pretty vocal about that, which is that they're staffing up from 250 to 400 employees, that they're moving into a new office in 2019, that they want to work on 2 projects concurrently, one being a new IP, one being an existing IP, and with certainty, one of them's probably Horizon Zero Dawn 2, which would be their existing IP, so they're probably working on a new IP. Well, anyway, this job listing more or less means that they're looking for some multiplayer talent. The job listing says you will build a robust backend that can scale up to serve many concurrent users. You will work on systems like matchmaking, tournaments, clans, and leaderboards. You will work on systems to test and deploy a new server set without downtime. You will integrate the game service with the PlayStation Network and other third-party services. Now, when you combine this with the fact that they've had a lot of recent hires from the first-person shooter community, and they had that, oh god, I forgot his name, but he's from Rainbow Six Siege. I mean, yes, they're probably working on a very multiplayer-focused first-person shooter. A lot of people are still theorizing it's a Killzone game, though. And to be fair, like I just mentioned, one of them is a new IP, one of them is an existing IP. Technically, Horizon Zero Dawn is now an existing IP. It came out in 2017. A sequel would be an existing IP. I mean, they can't not do a sequel to that game. It was highly successful. So I'm leaning towards the fact that this new FPS is probably a new IP. Maybe it is a Killzone, I don't know, but I would like to see them actually take a shot at something completely original, and that's coming from a Killzone fan. I would love more Killzone, but I just think that that franchise, you know, it resonated with a lot of people, but I don't think it resonated with enough people. It was never that game that really just took the world by storm. It had its entries, it did well, it had a fan base, but, you know, it didn't get that sort of recognition that franchises like Halo got, or Call of Duty or Battlefield just never quite got there. I would like to see Guerrilla take a shot at something else, and it looks like that is what we'll probably get. So, Bluepoint Games, we learned this past week during GDC that their next project is actually going to be more of a re-envisioning instead of a remake, and Bluepoint Games, if you don't know, has a long track record of being a fantastic developer, doing a lot of HD collections, remasters, remakes, ports, things like that. They do a great job. They did a lot of HD collections on PS3. They did Uncharted the Nathan Drake collection. They recently did Shadow of the Colossus. They've done fantastic work. If you ever need a game ported, remastered, things like that, it seems like Bluepoint is the way to go. And we've had a general idea of what they've been working on, which is earlier in the year they said that they're working on a game that is beloved by millions. Now, that could be anything. There's a lot of games that hold that moniker. But Bluepoint's technical director, Peter Dalton, had this to say. He said, "For Shadow of the Colossus, we don't call it a remaster, we coined it a remake due to the complexity of the project. And moving forward to our next project, we call it a re-envisioning, given that it goes well beyond what we thought was possible on Shadow of the Colossus." What's fuzzy about these is always the nomenclature of it, because there's so many different terms, and some people get a little confused by that. A remake being that the game is to the point where it's really touched up, right? Like Resident Evil 2, or like the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. Like, that's a full-blown remake. And then there's the HD collections from, like, say, PS2 to PS3, or even the Nathan Drake collection, PS3 to PS4, where it's a resolution bump, you know, it's a frame rate bump, you get a few extras, maybe, but it's nothing crazy, right? The core game is still there, nothing has dramatically changed. And then there's, like, re-envisionings, and I guess the best example there would be, like, the 2016 Ratchet & Clank, where it's the first game, but there's a lot of added content, you know, certain dialogue might have been changed, but it's almost a slight reimagining of it, or like a slight reboot, you know what I mean? Like, again, the wording gets a bit fuzzy there, but in a general sense, it's like, yeah, it's the first game, but it is different in many aspects. There's a lot of differences that you can draw from it. And so that's, I think, kind of what they're getting at here, is that whatever game that they're working on, it's still going to be that core game, but you can expect maybe a lot of quality of life improvements, maybe an extra section, which would be very interesting for Bluepoint to do something completely original in the landscape of whatever that game is. I'm not even going to sit here and try and take shots in the dark in terms of what this project is, because, again, they're saying it's a game beloved by millions. That could be a lot of things. It's just good, because, like, they've got this fantastic track record, so I'm quite confident that they'll do a good job. I just can't wait to see what it is. Now, this past week, we also got a release date for this PlayStation VR peripheral, and actually a list of games that are compatible with it. Now, if you're looking at it right now and you think it looks weird, it's a peripheral for the feet, more or less, and I can't even remember if we talked about when this thing was announced, but more or less, you're putting your feet on it, and you're not necessarily walking on it, you're more or less tilting this little, like circular surfboard type thing to take care of the movement in games that require movement. The list is quite small. They said there's going to be more games for it. It's quite an expensive peripheral, too. It's upwards of $150 some odd, I think. It's just a bit weird and jarring. The only reason why I'm mentioning this is because I think it looks so bizarre to the point where I can't see this being a fantastic way to take care of the locomotion in certain games that require it. Because that's the most jarring thing about some VR games right now is, moving around. You know, some games do it quite well. Some games use teleportation, which I think doesn't really work all that well at all. I'm a full-blown believer in those really large, obnoxious, like omnidirectional tracking pads. They're expensive and huge, and they're unsightly, but I mean, you put on a VR headset and you get that thing on the floor and you get it going and strap yourself in. As ridiculous as you look, that is the most immersed way to get in VR, because it actually simulates you running around and moving around in the environment. And hell, that's a crazy calorie burner. You don't realize how much strenuous activity some game characters use when you actually have to start doing it yourself, and that's why I would actually love to have something like that. But if you are interested in the 3D rudder, that's coming out June 17th this year. Now, while we're talking about PlayStation VR, I also want to mention a patent that was recently surfaced, and it's for prescription glasses actually while using PlayStation VR. More or less, if you wear glasses and you use VR, you're pretty familiar with this issue, but technically, while VR works with glasses, it's not the most ideal scenario. The tech doesn't really accommodate for people that wear glasses all that well, so actually Sony filed a patent that tries to alleviate this a little bit, because there's a problem with the motion tracking and things like that. So while VR, in a sense, still is in its infancy and it's a bit blurry for people that don't wear glasses, if you do wear glasses, it sometimes makes it a little more blurry, and it creates inaccuracies and problems with trying to play those games. Still works, but again, it's a small issue. Well, the patent is actually trying to accommodate that by these prescription glasses actually being made in such a manner where they're more compatible with VR tech. Again, it's a patent, you know, it gets into some technical jargon and things like that, but very cool that Sony's trying to cater to a specific subset of people that have problems with this. What I find interesting is that I actually wear glasses. I wear glasses for when I'm driving, and for, I forget what I don't know if it's near or if it's farsighted, but it's where I can't see far away, right? And because VR is so immersive in the sense where it really simulates things being far away or close up to you, I've actually noticed that when I wear PlayStation VR without glasses, the image is more blurry. So when I put on glasses and I'm using PlayStation VR, because I need those glasses to see things far away, I get a clearer picture using glasses. So, I don't necessarily understand the theatrics of how all this works and why it doesn't work, but at least for me, I've noticed that when I'm wearing glasses, I get a better picture quality. But again, I would assume it depends on the severity of, you know, your eyesight. Now for this one, it's just a quick reminder about the digital future that we live in, or the one that we're probably going to live in the next 5 to 10 years. But Activision recently had a poll about 14 games from PlayStation Network, more than likely because of just licensing and deals being, you know, timed up. Basically, these games are no longer available for purchase on the store, and those games are Angry Birds Star Wars, Chivalry, Medieval Warfare, Deadpool, Ghostbusters, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutants in Manhattan, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, The Legend of Korra, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, Transformers Devastation, Transformers Fall of Cybertron, Transformers Rise of the Dark Spark, and White Knight. Some of these games are actually pretty recent. The Tony Hawk one was, I think that game came out 2014, maybe 2015. You know, some of these games aren't that old and they're being removed from the store. Now I think in a legal matter, you have to have these games still available in the download list for a much, like a longer extended period of time. So if you've already purchased the game and you delete it and you want to re-download it, the link is always still there. That still lives on the store, but it doesn't allow new purchases. But even still, I mean, to the point where, say, 20 years when Sony closes the PlayStation Store on PS4, it'd probably be sooner than that, maybe 10, 15 years, but, you know, then you'd have zero access to those games that you've purchased. Which is also interesting because I forgot to mention this last week when we did our Drive Club news story. I mentioned how the servers are closing, but actually the Sony's delisting those games as well. So Drive Club VR, or Drive Club Bikes. I felt so bad leaving that out. Normally I don't leave out big details like that, but that's also pretty fascinating as well because that's quite a recent game. So again, if you bought those games digitally, I mean, yes, you'll still have access to the download of those games if you're ever ready to play them again. But now you just can't ever get those games again, more or less. Now you'd have to go out and physically buy Drive Club or Drive Club VR. And I'm not actually entirely sure if Drive Club Bikes ever got a physical release. So that might be like finito, more or less, until you actually, because you still have time to get that. But boy, it's just a frightening world sometimes. That's why I still love my cases. Now, Hideo Kojima, again, tweeting some stuff this past week. Not really major news, but he tweeted a picture of a Sam Figma figure. I guess it's like a test version of it where it's not painted or anything like that, but very much so. That's our Norman Reedus right there. now being turned into a figure. I think Figma means that it's opposable, so a lot of people were actually theorizing that this is probably for a collector's edition of the game, which I'm sure the game will feature a collector's edition, but as far as I know, like, most collector's editions usually have, like, a statue where it's not opposable or anything. I think Figmas are actually usually the ones where you can swap out certain parts and change their pose and things like that, which, by the way, I hate those figures. I like the statues. I'm all about the ones that just, like, are planted and don't have those ugly, unsightly, like, hinges in their arms and stuff. Oh, I can't stand those. But at the very least, looks like Kojima's totally down with merchandising, which is unsurprising whatsoever. I'm sure he's a guy that enjoys lots of money for the product for the products that he puts out. Now, we've got another job listing. This one's for Sucker Punch Productions, working on Ghost of Tsushima, but this one's a bit different from the one we just talked about with Guerrilla Games. This one kind of tells us that maybe this game's further out than we initially thought, because they're looking for a narrative writer, and the description for the job listing says they want the person to write high-quality dialogue under tight deadlines for a diverse cast of characters who live in the world of 13th century Japan, work closely with content designers to write missions for an open-world game, contribute to other creative areas of the narrative, including secondary game content, dialogue arcs, and writing content for marketing materials. Now, this is causing a bit of discussion, I guess, off the pure sense that it was probably assumed that the game had most of these roles filled and that most of the writing was complete. And I don't want to say complete in the sense that, oh yeah, the writing's done, now just do all the gameplay and things like that. That's not necessarily how that works. I'm sure writing is done right up until the game actually ships. But just a matter of the bulk of, like, the main storyline was finished, and sure, maybe you need a few writers, this and that, to do some side quests and things like that, or just tidy up, you know, certain instances, or what have you, right? But you would assume, you know, a major role like that was probably already filled. And you have to look at the timeline right here. I mean, the game was announced in 2017 during Paris Games Week, and the game was, of course, being developed before that, before we got that first trailer. So we're already looking at a 4 or 5 year development cycle, probably 5+ years now, right? They've shipped Infamous First Light in 2014, 2015. Either way, 4 or 5 year development cycle, and we're still probably looking at another 1.5 years. Now it seems more likely, although that's not really a surprise. I mean, we've only gotten, what, 2 or 3 trailers for this game, 1 gameplay trailer at the most. We had discussed last week, I think it was, where it's like, you know, out of the 3 PS4 exclusives we got right now that don't really have dates, which is The Last of Us Part 2, Death Stranding, and Ghost of Tsushima, I mean, one of these games has to be our sort of, like, late PS4 cycle game, and I think Ghost of Tsushima is probably going to be a good contender for that. It could probably come out, like, mid to late 2020, right up until, say, a few months out from a PS5 launch, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, Sony usually likes to have one last bang of a major exclusive come out for their previous platform before the next one comes in, so it looks like, it seems increasingly likely that that's probably going to be Ghost of Tsushima. And while on the topic of games releases, we can move on to our next news story, which is about Naughty Dog's communications director, Arnie Meyer. Responded to a fan on Twitter. Basically, the fan was asking, you know, can we get an update? What's going on with this game? More or less said he can't say much right now, but they'll talk about it when they can talk about it. This just goes into what we've been reiterating a few times on this channel and whenever we have this news story crop up, which is that, you know, these developers, not just Naughty Dog, but many developers and publishers industry-wide have really wised up to the fact that they're not going to give out details or share a release date or even a release window unless they have with certainty that they're going to hit that release date. And even though we just talked about it, you know, last week about Naughty Dog possibly aiming for a 2019 release, it's just a matter of they don't know if they're going to hit it. That's why we don't have a release date just yet. You would think, you know, we're almost halfway into 2019 now. We still don't know where this game, if this game's even going to come out this year. But I think it really is just a matter of they don't want to give a window unless they're, say, 4 or 5 months out from this game definitely releasing, which if the game is going to come out this year, we would probably get that release date soon. And now it's looking maybe likely that the game could slip into early 2019. I don't think it's going to be a situation where we'd see The Last of Us Part 2 well beyond that. I'm still kind of in a place where it's like it's either late 2019 or early 2020. I think that's a perfect area for the game. It would be great for it to hit the holidays, certainly. I mean, PS4 would, you definitely need a nice big boost like that as console sales start to slow down a little bit as we're going towards the end of the life cycle. But that would be a great holiday game for sure. And I'm sure Sony would love for the game to come out that early. Although, you know, Sony's not going to rush them. The game will be ready when it's ready, and that's more or less what Arnie's saying. Now, another interesting tidbit we got from GDC this past week was some DualShock 4 prototypes, which I found very interesting. That's why I'm going to show them to you. This was during a talk by Astrobot Rescue Mission developer Nicholas Doucette, and they look very cool. I just love seeing stuff like this. I mean, some of them are pretty interesting. a little weird looking, and you can see just how bizarre they get. I mean, one of them looks horrid where I think it's the face buttons and the D-pad are where the stick should be. That's just, that's just so weird looking. Sony is a company, 20 plus years now doing PlayStation. They've always had the sticks symmetrical. They've always had the controller and a pretty conservative design. They haven't changed it too much. DualShock 4 was the most radical change, and for the better. But in a general sense, that they've been pretty conservative with their design. But it's just funny to see how, during the R&D process, they will do some pretty crazy, outlandish things just off the pure sense of like trying to see what works and what people might enjoy. And they do focus tests and things like that to gauge user interest and see if people desire change and stuff like that. And some of them just look so bizarre. And I would have, God, if some of these came to market or I guess one, because they stick with one design pretty much throughout the whole life cycle. But if one of these actually made it to, I don't even want to think about it. It takes me back to the Boomerang controller from PS3 where it's like, thank God we didn't get that. Now for this news story, I'm just going to humor this one because of the rumor rundown of kind of where we're at right now in terms of PlayStation 5. But basically, this past week, some anonymous user on Pastebin posted a bunch of PS5 leaks, and super uncredible, of course. I mean, there's no sources, no credible websites picked up on this. I mean, normally we've got some pretty heavy substantiated PS5 rumors that actually do have a bit of credence to them. This one, of course, seems pretty outlandish, so there's really not a major reason to sort of look at this seriously, but at the very least, let's look at the current PS5 rumors that we have right now and fact check them, which I say that very loosely because there's no factual information whatsoever really about PS5. Just, again, very heavily substantiated rumors. It's a matter of the credibility of the sources. Well, anyway, this guy's post says, PS5 official info from Sony somewhere around next E3, saying Sony's not participating in E3, so he'd say Q2 2019 small reveal. Now, that actually is a rumor that we've already previously heard. PS5 released March 2020 or November 2020, not yet finalized. That's also pretty interesting because he says he's a AAA game developer for a PS5 launch title. So you would have, I don't know, I mean, I would assume you'd have a general sense of where the platform is going to launch, or you'd have a general idea of where that's going to be. It says backwards compatible. Again, we've heard that plenty of times before. Physical games and PS Store, no shit. PS Plus and PS Plus Premium. This is where it was picked up by a few websites because he says PS Plus Premium. Premium being that you'd get beta, early access, create private servers. That I would not expect whatsoever. That seems pretty ridiculous, so I wouldn't expect that whatsoever. Now, the specs, he says CPU, Ryzen 8 core, 16 threads, GPU, Navi architecture, around 14 teraflops. This is, again, what we've been hearing before. We know they're going with AMD. We have heard about the Ryzen 8 core, the Navi architecture. So this, what I'm saying is more or less that he's probably bullshitting just off the sense that we've already heard these things before, so he's more or less just repeating them. It's not necessarily new information. He's saying 2 terabyte HDD, some sort of NAND flash, 8K upscaling. That is ridiculous. PSVR 2 in 2020 also revealed with PS5, big resolution boost to 2560, 1440, 120 hertz, field of view, eye tracking, wireless battery, life of 4 to 5 hours, headphones integrated, less motion sickness, no breaker box. Now, we've heard about no breaker box. I don't think we're going to get wireless PlayStation VR. I don't think that's going to happen. Nor are we going to get the resolution he's claiming. DualShock 5, some sort of camera inside for VR. That actually is a rumor we've heard before. Price $499. That is also a rumor we've heard before. But he's saying $100 loss per console at the beginning. That I'm also not entirely sure if that's the case. That's the first time we've ever heard that. That sounds like BS to me, just off the sense that I know Sony's probably learned their lesson from taking loss on consoles, which is actually pretty typical in the console industry, but in recent years that's changed a little bit. Gran Turismo 7 VR, PUBG Remaster 4K, Last of Us 2 Remaster, Ghost of Tsushima Remaster, 2 to 3 AAA games or more, plus PSVR 2 games, Battlefield Bad Company 3, Harry Potter, GTA 6, Holiday 2020, most probably. Not hearing anything PS4 related. This is also, yeah, this is kind of ridiculous. Horizon 2 so far in 2021. Yeah, the more I read of that, the more ridiculous it got, because it's like the things that we've already heard before. And then the brand new information that he's supposedly claiming was just so outlandish and borderline impossible. It seems very unlikely. So I think we can safely debunk that entire rumor list. But keep in mind, on this channel, we've been very diligent on the PlayStation 5 rumors, however big or small they may be. We're keeping a running track of, what is what we keep hearing over and over again, and the kind of info that we've only heard from one or two sources. You know, I'm keeping track of that stuff. So at the very least, the next round of whatever PS5 rumors or rumor that we might get, we'll you know, run it back to that post as well. And certainly if one of those things actually ends up being true, you'll be the first to find out here on this channel. So with all that out of the way, it's time to get to Let's Talk Plus, our weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate Anthony Yaumans. You have won this week's Let's Talk Plus. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. Keep your eyes peeled for that. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very simple. We do this every single week on Let's Talk PlayStation, which is that you follow the link down below, and supporting the channel a number of ways gets you an entry for that $10 PSN code. Tune in next week to find out who the winner is. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about with you all from this past week. Now, if you didn't see on our Tuesday video, we did PlayStation Now. I played PlayStation Now for a little over a week. That was all I did was stream video games with 2 different internet speeds, one at 5 megabits per second, one at 100. You can see how it is to have crappy internet and then live on the greener side and enjoy fast streaming games and see what that future looks like. Most of you probably saw that video, but if you didn't, go check it out. Now, like I said earlier, our Tuesday video is probably going to be the PlayStation Network name changes. I will basically do a pretty thorough test. I'll boot up a lot of old PS3 and Vita games, try some, you know, redownloading content and things like that. That might take a little while to film. I wanted to do it day of, to be honest, but I was at work. I still hold a day job, so you know, I couldn't quite get that ready. So I'll probably upload that Tuesday. And if I don't get that done on Tuesday, or if at that point maybe not really a topic of interest, we'll do something else as always on that Tuesday video. It could be anything, really. I mean, that's what's great about those Tuesdays videos, is that it's going to be PlayStation, it's going to be random, and it's going to be exciting. And that's what we got to do on this channel, is keep those Tuesdays exciting. Or at the very least, that's what I'm trying to do here. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Becker. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.